Jill Allbrandt is our speaker today. She does so much to hold this fellowship together. We owe her many, many thanks. More than anyone I know, Jill blends right and left brain. Her engineer self, good at systems, procedures, interrelationships, strategies. She's board president, and all of those skills are invaluable in that setting. She also is so developed right brain with her healing work using her kinesiology modality, her spiritual development, her ability to connect to the divine and give readings and counseling. She's really a very extraordinary woman, and we are so lucky to have her. The talk title is The Esoteric Side of Life. Isn't that a great title? So, Jill will now bless us with a talk on the esoteric side of life. Let's greet her.
As Bruce does when he starts to speak, he asks the congregation to basically give him good energy so that what comes through will be more of a gift to you. So I'm asking you to do that now for me. It's to think of good energy so that I might more freely give the message that you need to hear. The esoteric side of life. I chose that title because esoteric means known to only a few. I have to confess, I almost went with occult, but it's such a charged word. And so, but occult means hidden. And that's really what I mean, that part of our lives that is hidden to the general population, known to a few, but I'm pretty sure known to most people in this room. So that's what I'd like to talk about, that energy that flows through us, in us, around us, as us, so that as we tap into that, we have greater life, greater happiness, greater love. I'll also have to tell you that until a couple of days ago, I had a completely different talk going on in my head. It was all about cars, your person, and looking under the hood and seeing what's going on. And okay, so Thanksgiving evening, I met someone who just completely changed the focus of my talk. But so if there's a few bumpy edges, please forgive me. So I wanted to explain the esoteric side of life, but it's like explaining how does a strawberry taste. You can't really know what that is until you've tasted it. But the only way for me to get close to that is to give you my experience of the esoteric side of life so that I might come close to explaining that. As most people do, I grew up with no spiritual skills, no guidance, as far as I could tell. Until I spoke with a woman at one of my dance classes, and she was saying how she was talking woo-woo or some crazy talk or something. But what she was saying was truth to me. And hearing that truth for the first time, that really resonated in me. I could feel that this was what I'd been looking for. And that, just that, set me on a completely different path in life. Just that one short conversation set me on a path of, wow, there are other people that think like I do. Wow, what a difference. Then I went along for a couple of years and I found the Fellowship of the Inner Light. And my first experience here was Paul was talking about Armageddon, because the Desert Storm was going on and the bombs going over Baghdad. and comparing that to prophecy. And what it came down to was not that he was prophesying necessarily that Desert Storm was the start of Armageddon, but he turned it to the Armageddon in us. And that if we wish to not participate in war, then we needed to be peaceful in ourselves. And that until everyone is peaceful within themselves, we will always have war. And that too set me on a new path, changed my path, that little bit. If you want to say the coincidence of my husband's roommate inviting me to her little wacko church changed the course of my life. It wasn't a miracle that occurred that day, but it was certainly going into the flow of this esoteric side of life that brought me here. And so as I went through inner light consciousness classes, recognizing that each one of us has the potential in us to remember the skills that God gave us naturally. Because we really do have them from birth. Some people continue to remember them. Some use them as part of their way of managing through life. Others of us manage through life by forgetting them, because so many parents say, oh, that's just your imagination. And so it was until I found this church, I was, 31 or 32, that I then set on my path to learning the esoteric part of life so that I could tap that information, so that I could lead a better and more peaceful life. And each one of us, I'm sure each one here, has access to that esoteric side. But the other day I met this guy, Thanksgiving dinner. We do a group Thanksgiving with our dance group. And I met this guy. He's a self-professed conservative, Orthodox, Pentecostal. And he's a 30-year missionary who goes around and fixes their churches when the pastors get a little ego-driven, as he didn't use those words, but I did. He would go around and speak the truth to the congregation. He prophesies, and I believe that he actually does do those things. And while I was talking with him, this part of my talk came to me, is that as we all gain skills through our lives, whether we got them from birth or through working very hard, which I did. All the classes that I took here, journaling, meditation, prayer, using all those tools to gain different skills. Started with an understanding of, if I calmed my mind and asked, is this driving? Okay, driving. Is this the better way to go, or is this? And I would get that information, and it always seemed to work very well. And then I began, over time, in classes when all I had to do was think of what the teacher was talking about. Then my brain was free. I would become aware that there were people who had passed in the vicinity, and they might want to tell me something. And as those grew, I recognized that as I calmed my mind and accessed more of this esoteric part of my life, I began gaining more and more skills. Because as many of us here have those skills, listening to this guy the other night talk, I realized, and I have for years, realized that so many people on the planet have these skills. But they're Pentecostal conservative people, or they're Catholics. And so those people also tie in the concept that my religion gives me these skills. My beliefs give me these skills. I am right because this works for me. Does that make sense? That when you're Catholic and your prayers are answered, you think you're right. Why wouldn't you? I mean, it's the way we think. My friend, who is also fairly conservative Pentecostal, I believe she absolutely gets prophecy. She answers when they're speaking in tongues at her church. She often gets the message that comes through. And so why wouldn't she think that her beliefs were right? They're what? Believing these things and living this way gave her these skills. And I have to say, New Age people are the same way. Because when we get these skills, we think that, of course, it's because we think this way, we believe this way, God's worked with me because I'm in the flow of life. I'm right, they're wrong, because it works for us. But as I'm sure many of you know, that there are as many paths to God as there are people on the planet. And as I was listening to this man, and he was lovely, absolutely lovely. I enjoyed every minute of talking to him. I realized that it's that confusion that we mix the access to the data, the access to the flow of life, access to the guidance, that we confuse with the receiving of gifts. I feel like I'm not explaining this very well, but I'll get there. Because the esoteric part of us is that energy flow that is throughout all of us, in us, around us. If we can tip our toe into that energy, if we can swim in that energy, it feels like a warm blanket being wrapped around us, nice and cozy. Why wouldn't we want to live there all the time? But we don't, do we? Who knows why? Ego, I expect. But that esoteric side of life is what we have access to, no matter who we are, no matter what we do. No matter what gifts we have, if we have no gifts at all, we have access to that 24/7. We simply have to listen, because it's there, coming at us. If we don't hear it, literally hear it, it will come at us through our irritating neighbor over the fence. They'll answer your question. It'll come through having a car accident and having a realization about something. If you're not listening and learning through that listening, God will get your attention in other ways. So however God can get into you, God will. She's pretty persistent. And on the other hand, as people believe they have these spiritual gifts and that they're right because they have these gifts, so God must be agreeing with what they're doing, whether they're ego-driven or not. I believe the two things are not necessarily connected. I think we all have guidance. We all can have it, we just need to listen. Spiritual gifts are developed. You either have them from birth or you can grow them. I am a perfect example of that because I had nothing when I started as far as I knew. And through journaling, meditation, prayer, I have built up skills that I'm really happy with. And I help others with them. But my skills don't mean that I am doing everything right 24/7. My guidance is what is there to tell me, oh, you're off this way a little bit. Maybe you want to go this way a little more. And it's the listening that steps me along my path so that as I develop my skills greater and greater, I am in alignment with that energy. And as we recognize the two systems are different, then we can accept a conservative Pentecostal guy as a prophet. Why was I sitting there talking to him for like a half an hour? I was drawn to him. He's a chatter, and so we chatted for a long time. But I can accept who he is, what he is, and know that his skills are real without necessarily believing I have to go be a conservative Pentecostal person. It also means that I don't need to judge him as being wrong for being conservative Pentecostal just because it's not my cup of tea. Does that make sense? And so as we tip our toe into the flow of life and look at what we can or can't do with those skills, recognize that the people that are in other religions are doing the same thing. It's the same pool. It's the same flow. Paul used to say that we could take our message to any religion as long as we put it in their language. I believe that. I believe that's true because particularly inner light consciousness goes down to the truth of life. And so taking those truths into someone else's language, that can absolutely happen. I have to tell you a little secret. So when he said that, I believed him. And I believed that everyone else believed like I did. I just need to learn their language. Okay, then I grew up. And I realized that not everybody believes exactly like I do. But their core part of their religious beliefs is that God is love. And so that's the basis through which we step out into different languaging to allow us to speak to them on the same level and understanding. Our lives go through many changes. And as we step up in spiritual skills, if that's what we want to learn, it's the absence of judging others that will help leapfrog us ahead. But the only way to get to that point is to listen to that flow of life that is going on below the surface. That energy that is below the surface, flowing through each of us, whether we're New Age Gnostics or conservative Pentecostals. It's all the same energy. It is God. It is all of us. We are God. We are in God. As Susan Thomas likes to say, God looks through us as us. I love that. The idea that God is experiencing life through me. I'm waiting for an epiphany. As we grow in our skills and recognizing that they're different than the guidance that we get, then we can see that, well, it's the freedom of judgment about ourselves and about others that can step us through life easily and quickly. but it's the listening to that ever-present guidance that allows us to be part of that flow. Whether we have skills or no skills, it is the listening and the learning that will take us along. Because once you stop listening and stop learning, God is very patient with us. We can have spiritual skills and use them for bad ends. And God will, through this esoteric side, tell us over and over, okay, you need to change. You need to go over here. Really, really, over and over and over. She's very patient, really. But ultimately, there'll be warnings that your gifts will be gone if you don't heed. Heed the warning to shift your path. And so, overall, I'd have to say that I guess I'm here to say, listen and learn. Thank you.